Population composition or the demographic structure refers to those characteristics of population which are measurable and which help us distinguish one group of people from the other. Age, sex, literacy, place of residence and occupation are some of the important components which reflect the composition of population. They also help in setting future agenda for development. To familiarize with the concept of population composition, to examine the age structure and sex ratio, and to examine the literacy and occupation. Population composition refers to the physical, socio-cultural and economic attributes of population such as age, sex, place of residence, religion, language, marital status, ethnicity, literacy, education and occupation. The population composition is the internal structure attributes at a particular point of time. It also helps in understanding and providing a clearer vision of the dynamics of population changes. Among various elements of population composition, sex composition, age composition and economic composition hold a prime place for population geographers. The separate data for males and females are important for various types of planning and for the analysis of other demographic characteristics such as natality, mortality, migration, marital status, economic characters, etc. The balance between the two sexes affects the social and economic relationship within a community. Since the two sexes play partly contrasting and partly complementary roles in the economy and society, the study of sex composition assumes added significance for a population geographer. The shape of the population pyramid tells the story of the people living in that particular country. The number of children, that is below 15 years, are shown at the bottom and reflect the level of births. The size of the top shows the number of aged people and reflect the number of deaths. The population pyramid also tells us how many dependents there are in a country. There are two groups of dependents, that is one, young dependents, that is aged between or below 15 years, and elderly dependents aged over 65 years. Those of the working age are the economically active. The age structure of a population refers to the number of people in different age groups. The size of the various age groups does vary from one population to other and also over the course of time. If the number of children in the population is high, the dependency ratio will be high. A large size of population in the age group of 15 to 59 years indicates the chances of having a larger working population. Similarly, a growing population in the age group of 60 plus indicates greater expenditure on the care of the aged. If there are large numbers of young people and the birth rate is high, the population is youthful, as is the case in many developing countries of Asia, Africa and South America. On the other extreme, if the birth rate is low and the longevity among people is high, the population is said to be aging. This is happening in many European countries, the USA, Canada and Japan. At times, extreme events like wars and natural calamities can distort the age structure because of losing population in certain age groups. Generally, population of a country is grouped under three broad age groups, that is, first one, children between 0 to 14 years, adults between 15 to 59 years and aged over 60 years and above. Examination of age group statistics of different parts of the world reveals that proportion of adult population is least variable of the three groups. The major regional differences lie in the proportion of children and the aged. On the basis of the variation, three types of age structures have been identified. First one, the West European type, where the children and the aged constitute 30% and 15% population respectively. The second one, the US type, the proportion of children and the aged in the population are 35 to 45% and 10% respectively. Third one, the third world type, children constitute 45 to 55% of population, whereas the aged constitute only 4 to 8% of population. Age pyramids give males are arranged to the left and females to the right of a vertical axis, which is divided either into single or multiple years or intervals. The shape of the pyramid can indicate the history and characteristics of the population portrayed. Thus, three kinds of shapes are associated with three kinds of population situation. 1. A stationary population. A regularly tapering pyramid shows unchanging birth and death rates over a long period of time. 2. A progressive population. A wide based and rapid tapering shows an increasing birth rate and high death rate. 3. Regressive population. A narrow base and narrow top pyramid shows declining birth rate and death rate. The age structure of the world population reveals the following characteristics. World population is more youthful with about 36% population in the age group below 15 years. There are regional variations though, as the corresponding figures for the more developed and developing regions are 23% and 40% respectively. There is yet wider countries that are characterized with high fertility rates have large proportions of young population and the vice versa. This age group is economically unproductive and needs more money to be spent on food, clothing, education and medical facilities. The adult age group, that is between 15 to 59 years, is always higher than others, though it is proportionately more in developing countries. This group is biologically the most reproductive, economically the most productive and demographically the most mobile. The aged people, that is between 60 years and more, increases as the population of a country completes its demographic evolution. In the developed countries, the number of females in the age group is more than that of the males. Increasing population of this age group has more demands on health and social services. Sex ratio is an index of balance between males and females in a given population. It is measured in terms of number of females per 1000 males. Male births exceed female births in almost all the societies, but a number of pre and post natal conditions at times alter this situation very drastically. In developing countries, infant mortality is higher among the males than the females, so that excess of males is cancelled out within 1 year. Even in developed countries, male mortality is higher than female mortality at all stages of life. As such, excess of males at birth is progressively eliminated until from about the age of 30 onwards there is an increasing dominance of females. In many developing countries, women being given a subordinate role in the society often suffer high mortality rates in childbirth. It leads to unfavorable sex ratio. overall sex ratio in these countries is often unfavorable to females. Apart from differential birth or death rates among the two sexes, the sex ratio is also influenced by migration of either males or females, which has serious impact on sex ratio. In earlier times, international and long distance migration almost always showed a marked predominance of males, thus creating a serious imbalance in the sex ratio of both the sending and receiving areas. At present, the male predominant region are only such fringe areas as Alaska and Northern Territory of Australia, both of which have 1,350 men for every 1,000 women. The degree of sex selectivity of internal migration appears to be closely related to the technical and economic evolution of a country concerned. In developing countries, especially in Africa and Asia, there is a marked predominance of male migration from villages to towns. Indian towns have an unusually high proportion of males. In Kolkata, for example, there are 570 women for every 1,000 men. In economically advanced nations, the reverse is generally true. With the exception of migration to the centers of mining and heavy industries and military towns, females also migrate from rural to urban areas. An analysis of the differences in the sex composition of rural and urban areas in different countries show that the migration stream does not produce influx of females from their rural areas to avail the vast employment opportunities in urban areas. Farming in rural areas remains largely a masculine occupation. By contrast, the sex ratio in Asian cities, especially in India, remain male dominant due to predominance of male migration. Problems of housing, high cost of living, paucity of work opportunities and lack of security in cities discourage women to migrate from rural to urban areas. Literacy is that qualitative attribute of population which is a fairly reliable index of the socio-economic development of an area. It reflects that social aspect of population by which its quality can be ascertained. There is a wide variation over the world in the literacy rates, which denotes the percentage of people age group, that is 15 and above, who can with the understanding both read and write a short simple statement in their everyday life. Of educational facilities and the policies of the government. Level of economic development is both a cause and a consequence of literacy. The developed and urban economies reflect higher literacy rate and higher standards of education. Low levels of literacy and education indicate rural farm economies. It is only in the developing countries of the world today that the literacy revolution is yet to take its shape, where such differences occur more. While the earliest forms of written communication date back to about 3500 to 3000 BC, literacy remained for centuries a very restricted technology closely associated with the exercise of power. It was only until the Middle Ages that book production started growing and literacy among the general population slowly started becoming important in the Western world. In fact, while the ambition of universal literacy in Europe was a fundamental reform born from the Enlightenment, it took centuries for it to happen. It was only in the 19th and 20th centuries that rates of literacy approached universality in early industrialized countries. Literacy rates among youth, that is aged between 15 to 24, and adults are the test of an educational system and the overall trend in positive thanks to the expansion of educational opportunities. Globally, the youth literacy rate increased from 83% to 91% over 2 decades, while the number of illiterate youth declined from 170 million to 115 million. Regional and gender disparities persist. However, literacy is lowest in least developed countries and higher among males than females. In the most recent years for which data are available, young women accounted for 59% of the total illiterate youth population. The economically active section of any population is generally defined as those who are engaged in remunerative occupation and who seek a livelihood in such occupations. Children below working age, old people, retired persons, housewives and students who are not engaged in economic pursuits for their livelihood are excluded from the active population. The proportional distribution of this active population under specific economic activities is known as occupational structure. The United Nations has identified the following categories of occupations, namely agriculture, forestry, hunting and fishing, mining and quarrying, manufacturing industry, construction, electricity, gas, water and health services, commerce, transport, storage and communication services, unclassified occupations. This classification is essential for international comparisons, but each country classifies its population in different occupational categories according to its own needs. The proportions of working population engaged in these activities vary significantly among different countries depending upon their level of economic development. The proportion of working population is very high in primary activities if the economy is less developed. As it moves forward, the proportion in secondary and then in tertiary increase gradually. In highly industrialized countries, the proportion of people employed in tertiary sector is more than 40 to 45%. In USA, it is more than 70%. Statistics are not available for quaternary sector, but it is suggested that though it employs a small percentage at the moment, it is characterized by the highest income and a high degree of mobility. So, here the picture gives us an idea about the various types of occupation and percentages in India, and then the division of population into rural and urban is based on the residence and is made at a different size point in most of the countries. This division is necessary because both of them differ from each other in terms of their livelihood and social environment. The occupational structure, density of population and level of social and economic growth vary between the two groups. People living in the villages and engaged in agriculture or primary activities are characterized as rural. The urban populations, on the other hand, are engaged in non-agricultural activities. People are attracted to urban areas in search of employment opportunities, better social facilities and higher standard of living. Urban population increases due to natural growth and migration of people from rural areas. Criteria of labeling a settlement urban vary from one country to another. In USA, an area with a population of less than 2,500 is considered rural, while an area of more than 2,500 inhabitants is called urban. In India, all areas which are not urban are by definition rural. Percentage of rural population is higher farm-based agricultural countries, while industrially developed regions have higher share of urban population. Only Asia and Africa had more than 60% rural population, while 62% of the world's total population had an urban residence. With about 77% of its population being urban, North America is the most urbanized continent. The world's urban population is currently growing by 60 million per year, which is about 3 times the increase in rural population. In other words, the urban population of the world has been growing more rapidly than the rural population since the emergence of the first urban settlement on the world scene. About 2 centuries ago, that is around 1800 century, only 2.5% of the world's population was living in urban areas, and in 1960, about 1/3 of the total world population lived in cities. But by 1999, over 47% of the world's total population has an urban residence. Most of this urban growth, about 60% of 60 million, reflects natural increase among current city dwellers, those born in the city. The rest is accounted for by rural-urban migration. A prominent feature of population redistribution, particularly in developing countries, is the growth of major cities. Almost half the world's population lives in cities. Between 1960 and 2000, the urban population increased more than 3 times, that is from 800 million to 2.8 billion. During the same period, the world's total population doubled from 3 billion to 6 billion. It is projected that there will be about 8 billion city dwellers by 2030, and 80% of them will live in developing countries. People are central to the development process and an integral element in all development strategies. There are many different and often conflicting views on the meaning of development. The most appropriate strategies need to be followed at different points of time and in space. Large size population has been viewed by many as a negative factor in the development. However, much depends on its quality. Relationship between population and food supply has been a subject of study ever since Malthus projected a grim future for humanity. If population continue to rise faster than food production, given the uneven rate of population growth and technological breakthroughs in food production, there are difficulties in forecasting rates of increase in food supply or how consumption will vary. The fact, however, remains that over the use or misuse of the land with a view to increase food production has its serious implications for environment and thus indirectly for food security. The vital questions to explore are these regional differences in the rate of population growth in consonance with the regional disparities in the supporting capacity of the areas? If not, how far are these differences in growth rate responsible for creating imbalance between the population and the resources? Growth of population thus becomes a vital element in any assessment of population resource balance. But we cannot ignore the fact that high growth of population or the deficiencies of the resources alone are not responsible for the imbalance. The nature and social structure, the stage of technological advancement, the characteristics of distribution system and the public policies are the elements that influence the balance between the In any assessment of balance between the population and the means of subsistence, all these constitute important elements of the system.